Gang, I'm going to go ahead and lower the lights while you finish this up, just so I can show some examples on the screen. And I'm recording this too for the other group. They've already, of course, seen most of this. But I'm right now in the Project 6 folder. And the very first thing in there are the photographs that the group took on Monday. So what I did was I included general shots that I took of like the whole table. And then these are the ones that they took. These are their sort of zoomed in sections that I sized to be as close to the proportion of your 18 by 24 as possible. So of course I will add yours into that today as well. But as a backup, you've got all the photos that we took, including the overviews of the whole thing. There are other things that are in a lot of other folders. I put the tips on measuring in all of the projects that had anything to do with still life. There's a video on value that's useful that's been in on several other projects as well. But the main area to look at really for now is this tips on subtractive method. So this is what you're doing right now, right? You're working on adding value and then smoothing it out. So this image right here where I'm using just my fingers is kind of my don't do this advice. You have oil, of course, in your skin, and that will start to kind of make the charcoal bond permanently to the paper. It's kind of irritating. So make sure you're blending with something like a piece of paper towel, Kleenex toilet tissue, piece of old t-shirt, and this is what you're aiming for really, is that you want your value to be not jet black, but not the light end of the middle. You want it somewhere in here, somewhere in that darker end of the middle range. Now here's the advantage of using this technique, and it's kind of amazing to me that it is as successful as it can be. That image on the far left, you can pretty easily, I think, recognize those objects. I've got a wine bottle, an upside down drinking cup, and a shoebox. But those are drawn just with outlines, right? And it's crazy how much that makes them look super flat. Just like if you only put outlines in black on a white piece of paper, it tends to make things look flat. So we want to avoid drawing like that. We don't want you to go in and make white, ghosty outlines and then kind of fill the object in. So anytime you make a mistake, can you see how I'm fixing that? That's the same piece of paper. All I did was take one of my broken chunks of charcoal, rub it a little bit over the top, and then blend it in, and it makes those mistakes just completely vanish. Remember how hard it was to erase anything when we did cross-hatching if you put the mark in the wrong place? Like you could still see it, it would even dent the paper. You're not going to have that problem with this method at all. So here's what we kind of want to see, not the image at the left, but the one at the right. Don't those objects look more three-dimensional already? And I promise you, I spent the exact same amount of time on each of those attempts. So what did I do differently, do you think, on the one on the right? I absolutely did. When I was drawing the objects, I looked at both the value and the contour. So I used the eraser to make the contour and the value at the same time. But most importantly, I looked at the space between the objects. So suddenly, truly, everything we've done is coming all together at once. Your gesture helps you figure out your composition. The positive negative space is going to help you deal with making the objects look like they exist in three-dimensional space. The cross contour and cross hatching helped you think about volume and helped you get sensitive to the range of values that you can see. But now that we're using charcoal, it's going to feel a little more like painting, a little more like art, and less like doing something that's more like an exercise. So don't ignore those empty spaces. What about if I screw up? Can you see how badly I drew that wine bottle on the left? We had one vase out there in last week's still life that one student got really mad at in the Monday class. He was like, it's completely asymmetrical, it's driving me crazy. Well, that's a really asymmetrical wine glass, right, or bottle. So how did I fix it? That image at the bottom middle is the correction. What did I do? I erased more, exactly. You can see that the right-hand side is kind of short, right, where what we would call the neck of the bottle goes to the shoulder. The shoulder's too low. So all I did here was take the eraser and erase into that space to make those more even. You can also correct things by covering them up. I decided that this base of the bottle was too low, as if I had measured it wrong and made it too tall. I took some charcoal, wiped it across there, and blended it. That's the new base. That's where the old one was. You can just barely see it. So the corrections, surprisingly, are relatively easy to make. But it really does make you think about the object and the space, the value and the contour. It puts everything we've done all together in one. Here's why I wanted you to be careful with your starting value. The one on the left is where you guys are right now. You have a middle dark, or dark end of middle value. The one on the right is way too light. So what did that person have to do on the right almost immediately? Yeah, he had to go in and add in the darkest shadows, right? Which did not happen on the one on the left. So both of those drawings are about one class period's worth of work. The one on the left is done correctly. And what I would recommend doing, quite frankly, is go for the lightest lights. Do your brightest highlights, and then work your way down. At the end, what happens if there's something out there that's darker than this value that we have on the paper? That's when you go back and add. So you're looking at doing about 75% of your work with your erasers. I would recommend using two different types of erasers. Those white plastic ones that look kind of like regular school erasers are awesome, especially for large shapes. But the problem you are having, Morgan and Megan, is to take the kneaded eraser, you can pinch it and shape it into a fine point, and that'll let you get into tiny details. My favorite thing, though, with the kneaded eraser, and we talked about this a couple days ago, the idea of stretching it out kind of like a pancake and pressing it without scrubbing back and forth, pressing it into the paper and lifting it up. It will literally take charcoal off the top layer without smearing your mark making, so you can lighten things really easily. That means that your kneaded eraser is going to get messy as all get out. So in order to keep it clean, you pull it apart kind of like taffy till it snaps, stick it back together, pull it apart, and just keep doing that, and it'll take the excess charcoal off of it. So you can absolutely take and keep a white plastic eraser and a kneaded eraser from classroom stock. I have dozens more in the storage, so you can flat out have the ones you start using today because they're going to get messy. What else do I want to say? That's pretty much all of the info that you need, I think, to get going on the drawing itself. But just to give you a little inspiration, take a look at, there's videos on how to do it as well, but take a look at some of the students' work from the past. So these are people just like you. It's their first year art student work. About halfway through the school year, the subtractive projects start to happen. And these are almost always the standout thing that people make in the first half of this course. So you can see they've got a similar setup, fabric and objects that are shiny, glass, etc., under really extreme lighting. And then you can see the quality of those cross contours in the drapery, the reflections on the metal objects. You can get more detail. For those of you who love detail, you can still do that at the end if you want to go in and sharpen things up with a pencil, with a charcoal pencil, you can do that. You can create the texture of wood or metal or fabric. These can look really beautiful, like black and white and gray oil paintings or acrylic paintings. Some of them almost look photographically real. The trick to doing things that are plastic, shiny, or glass that you can see through is to think about drawing what you see through the glass. Instead of putting a white or a black outline around it, think about what values you see through the glass. Here's a really good example. On the still life that's facing the courtyard side, there's one small bottle in there that's sort of a light pinkish color. It's color but transparent. That's not the same exact one, but it's similar to the bottle in the middle on the screen right now. Can you guys see the value of the shadow through the glass on that box behind it? That's how to handle glass. You almost pretend like it isn't even there. You draw the value, the shape, the color that you see through it, and then come back and add the highlights and shadows on top. So you can see that there's a variety of styles here too. Like some drawings are a little tighter, more detailed, some are a little more expressive. You are not being dictated to that you have to draw in the same style. Quite the contrary. I'm trying to help you find your own voice. Your voice may be very tight and specific, and that's great. Your voice might be, I want to do deeper space. If you want to really challenge yourself and show not just the still life, but the room, that's a pretty cool challenge. The student even showed us a little bit out into the hallway in this version. Check out the clear glass. The wine bottles in particular in these tend to be clear, and you can see straight through them to the value of what's behind them. That's one of my all-time favorites just because it's so meticulously done. Unfortunately, right after we finished that, they dropped the Christmas ornaments. You don't have anything that reflective, but there's a couple metal and glass things out there to provide you some challenge. Notice that on none of these, really, do you see solid black lines around the outside or solid white lines around the outside. The value of the object goes right up to its edge where it meets the value of whatever is next to it or behind it. So think about trying to get rid of outlines where you don't need them. This almost looks like a black and white photograph. There's no white line around the outside of things. There's no dark black line. You can see, though, like for instance, this bottle is very dark against the shape beside it, so no need for a line. Here, this vase is very light, but it's throwing a cast shadow that's much darker, so no need for a line there either. So if you really think about the relationship between the object and the space around it, you'll get the right answer every time. You can even see the reflection of the person doing the drawing. Can you see that? There they are in their own piece. And when it's shockingly believable, it looks really three-dimensional. It really is true that the value in the contour is the key. That's a great example of clear glass. You can obviously see what's in the glass, and you guys have some jars that have some, I believe, seashells and things in them, so you have that advantage, but you can also see how the light changes as it reflects on the glass. That's a great place to end. That looks very believable, very realistic. You can see what's in the glass. The glass isn't rendered as a dark line around the outside. It distorts what you see through it into the background. So that's kind of what we're aiming for this assignment. This, again, is a chance for you to really go to town and make the best possible result. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the camera here. And I'm going to pop on the light on the still life. So now that you've got your paper prep, your next goal is figure out a composition that you like. You can shoot from either side. Even if you're working on the wrong side of the room, you could work on an image from this side of the room. The resolution is really not great on this camera when we're in the dark. It goes real pixely. But I will put a live image up of the still life, but there are, of course, the photos we took last time online. Once you've got a photo that you're happy with, you're going to email it to me, and I will start printing it out. As you know, it takes a minute to do the printing because I have to do it from my desk and I have to print it to the printer on the second floor. So it may take me a hot minute to get them done. You can work from the images on the phone until I get them printed for you. Okay? So the email address is on the board right here behind Grace, and it's hard to see. bcbillingsly41@mail.cfcc.edu. You probably have an email from me you can reply back to, but it's right there underneath where it says 5 minutes, 35 seconds is the email address.